Soldiers secured a quiet agricultural compound in the village of Ad-Daur. They located a suspicious patch of soil. What does the finale of absolute power look like? A narrow hole under a layer of debris on a farm. On the night of December 13, 2003, operators of the 4th Infantry Division extracted Saddam Hussein from this exact subterranean cavity near Tikrit. Troops cleared away the surface camouflage of scattered bricks and loose dirt. They exposed a concealed vertical shaft. A polystyrene lid blocked the entrance. Operators lifted the cover. A dense stench hit the air. The heavy smell of damp earth mixed with the stale sweat of an unwashed body trapped inside a sealed space. Down in the dark, they found a man. Military intelligence expected a defiant dictator who ruled with an iron grip. Reality presented an aged, disoriented individual in soiled clothing. He did not fight. The extraction team pulled him up into the blinding surface light. His beard hung long and matted. His hair remained completely untrimmed. A loaded pistol lay abandoned in the dirt directly beside him. He ignored it. The hunt ended. This spider hole measured barely 2 meters in length. The underground structure featured only a rudimentary air pipe and a small exhaust fan. This physical confinement exposed a radical institutional contrast. Hussein previously commanded 82 opulent palace complexes across the entire country. Now, his absolute domain equaled the size of a shallow grave. Coalition forces immediately transferred the detainee into strict military custody. To force a supreme leader into a subterranean pit, the spring of 2003 required a total demolition of Iraq's state infrastructure. The 24-year apparatus of absolute social control collapsed in mere hours. Ministries stood empty. Sentries abandoned their fortified checkpoints. The centralized system of fear evaporated. This systemic failure resulted directly from the invasion of 2003. Coalition forces dismantled the command hierarchy with mechanical precision. Airstrikes instantly neutralized communication nodes. Ground units bypassed static armor. Orders stopped reaching the streets. Citizens saw the power vacuum. On April 9th, American tanks breached central Baghdad. Firdaus Square became the focal point of the institutional crash. Troops secured the plaza perimeter. A mechanized recovery vehicle attached chains to a towering monument of the dictator. The bronze structure snapped at the base and hit the pavement. A specific acoustic rhythm immediately followed. The sharp sound of leather shoe soles striking the toppled bronze face echoed across the plaza. The public destruction of the statue on April 9th launched a synchronized, multi-month military manhunt for the vanished dictator. While Hussein dissolved into the unmapped shadows, civilian looters systematically stripped the unprotected government buildings down to their concrete frames. Hussein disappeared from the looted capital. He immediately became the primary target of Operation Red Dawn. How do you find one man in a ruined country? Command utilized social network analysis, interrogations of relatives, and a deck of cards. Analysts ignored the open desert. They targeted his human infrastructure. Intelligence teams systematically hacked his kinship ties. Strike units raided suspected safe houses. Soldiers arrested his closest aides. They detained his bodyguards. Interrogators broke his extended family members. Every captured cousin or driver provided a new data point. The military machine converted human loyalty into operational coordinates. To synchronize the search, Command deployed a specific analog tool. The Pentagon printed photographs of the top officials on a standard deck of playing cards. Officially, military planners designated them as personality identification playing cards. Quartermasters distributed 55 card sets to thousands of frontline troops. Soldiers mechanically memorized the faces of the regime elite. Hussein himself was the Ace of Spades, the highest value node. The continuous interrogation cycles worked. The extracted data mapped his survival network. The search radius rapidly collapsed. By late 2003, analysts traced the overlapping coordinates to the rural outskirts of Tikrit, his hometown, the ancestral stronghold. Combat teams systematically sealed the perimeter. They neutralized his local support structure, block by block. Finally, the number of available hideouts dropped to 0. The target extracted from a dirt cellar had previously spent 24 years micromanaging every classroom and office in Iraq. The system launched on July 16, 1979. The Ba'ath Party apparatus locked down the country. Visual control was absolute. Portraits of the leader hung above chalkboards in primary schools. Workplace supervisors enforced mandatory praise sessions. Audio tapes of his speeches looped continuously on state radio frequencies. The broadcasts echoed from public loudspeakers across city streets, day and night. Over 24 years of rule, an entire demographic of Iraqis reached adulthood. They possess zero physical memory of any other visual or auditory political reality. The state enforced compliance through a massive network of spies. The Mukhabarat placed informants in every residential block. One critical comment triggered immediate collective punishment. Secret police units arrived at night. Entire families disappeared without a trace. External crises only tightened the internal grip. The security apparatus crushed regional uprisings and absorbed border conflicts. Even decades of strict economic sanctions failed to break the institutional fear. The population remained paralyzed. His overthrow seemed absolutely impossible. The mechanics of this absolute control surfaced in the precise records of July 1982. Dujail operated as an agricultural hub 50 miles north of Baghdad. What is the price of a few shots at a presidential motorcade? The execution of 148 people and the total liquidation of a city's agricultural infrastructure. The operation started over a localized security breach. The armored presidential motorcade traveled down the main road. Operatives from the Islamic Dawa Party opened fire. Bullets struck the lead vehicles. The dictator survived. The physical threat lasted less than 2 minutes. The bureaucratic retaliation spanned decades. Troops locked down the city perimeter. Night raids began within hours. Soldiers breached residential doors. Guards dragged entire families out into the dirt streets. Transport trucks absorbed the civilian population. Interrogation units processed the detainees through rapid starvation and stress positions. But the physical arrests only initiated the first phase of the response. The state then targeted the geography itself. Engineering battalions deployed to the city limits. The mechanical clanking of heavy bulldozers echoed across the fields. Steel blades methodically uprooted mature date palms. Tractors leveled ancient fruit orchards. Destroying agricultural lands was not a spontaneous act of revenge. It was a calculated economic sentence. Depriving the city of its basic hydro and agro infrastructure doomed the survivors to slow starvation. The regime systematically erased the financial base of the entire settlement. Sham tribunals without defense lawyers condemned 148 men and teenagers to death. 2 decades later, prosecutors used the signed execution warrants from this specific operation as the primary legal foundation to hang the dictator. The legal mechanism engaged. The Dujail operation charges transformed a captured fugitive into an institutional defendant. Hundreds of tortured and executed citizens. One single death sentence. On November 5, 2006, the tribunal delivered the verdict: death by hanging. This ruling formalized the first legal execution of a former Arab head of state in modern Middle Eastern history. How do you isolate a judicial process from a country engulfed in civil war? Concrete, barbed wire, and armed escorts. The court operated inside the heavily fortified Green Zone. Outside the perimeter, Baghdad burned. Inside, monolithic concrete blast walls blocked the horizon. Armored personnel carriers transported the judges. Security contractors restricted all movement. Insurgents systematically targeted the legal teams. Gunmen assassinated multiple defense lawyers right on the streets. The tribunal functioned not as a triumph of justice, but as a heavy bureaucratic machine in a besieged capital. Television networks broadcast the secure feed across the entire nation. Millions of citizens watched the transmission in real time. The defendant constantly interrupted the sessions. He shouted. He rejected the jurisdiction. The guards ignored the outbursts. The technical protocol simply moved forward. During the final session, a ringing silence filled the hall. The chief judge read the document aloud. The dictator stood rigid. Two men beside him gripped the wooden railing. The court processed the remaining architects of the massacre. Former intelligence chief Barzan Ibrahim al-Tikriti and Chief Judge Awad Hamed al-Bandar received the exact same sentences of death by hanging. As the verdicts finalized on November 5, 2006, a separate mechanism was already running in the background. The logistics of maintaining the defendant under U.S. guard had functioned in absolute secrecy for more than 2 years of isolation. High-value detainee protocols required constant movement, unmarked transport helicopters, blackout goggles. The Americans rotated the prisoner through classified holding sites like Camp Cropper. Security dictated total information blackout. Any leaked coordinate risked an armed extraction attempt by loyalist militias. The procedural machinery actually engaged a year prior. On October 19, 2005, the tribunal opened the first formal session. The prosecution faced a structural deficit. Investigators held files on dozens of extermination campaigns, chemical warfare, erased villages, hundreds of thousands dead. But prosecuting the entire apparatus of the regime required decades of litigation. The court lacked time. They needed a rapid, flawless conviction. Out of dozens of documented mass repressions, the tribunal selected the Dujail massacre of 1982 exclusively. The choice relied on pure legal calculation. The prosecution possessed a reinforced concrete evidence base. They held original execution warrants with verified signatures. They had living witnesses ready to testify. The court bypassed the largest atrocities to secure the most technically provable one. The judges discarded the broader historical charges and locked the judicial focus strictly onto that single mass execution. The legal calculus that isolated the 1982 incident operated as a detonator. The institutional mechanism instantly fractured the streets of Baghdad and Tikrit. Shiite districts celebrated a legal triumph. Sunni provinces ignited a sectarian rebellion. Why did the new government and their American security forces demand immediate execution? A prolonged timeline gave loyalist militias a critical window to coordinate mass uprisings. The nation split. Men stepped onto concrete balconies in Sadr City. They pointed Kalashnikovs at the sky. Tracer rounds illuminated the heavy urban smog. The sharp, overlapping cracks of automatic gunfire merged directly with the sterile, steady voices of television news anchors broadcasting the verdict across the grid. 100 miles north, the visual shifted entirely. Crowds flooded the commercial center of Tikrit. Demonstrators raised massive cardboard portraits of the condemned leader above the mob. They blocked the intersections. The Iraqi High Tribunal issued its ruling. The protocol left no room for negotiation. Article 27 of the foundational statute dictated the operational timeline. The 30-day limit for execution under Iraqi law eliminated any bandwidth for political bargaining. It converted a volatile judicial procedure into an automated, unstoppable conveyor belt. The defense filed a final motion to halt the machinery. The appellate chamber processed the documents. They denied the request. On December 26, 2006, the court officially rejected the paperwork. The state apparatus engaged the terminal protocol. The countdown locked at exactly 30. On December 26, 2006, the appellate court rejected the final plea. The state machine immediately relocated the condemned to the functional block of the Camp Justice Isolation Ward. The former dictator lost his remaining geography. A whole nation shrank to the dimensions of a single concrete box. The facility operated strictly on utility. Architects designed the execution block for maximum spatial efficiency. Rapid termination of biological function. A sturdy rope hung in the adjacent chamber. Engineers pre-calibrated the drop mechanics according to the prisoner's exact height and weight to prevent structural errors. Guards enforced standard protocols inside the holding area. No privileges, no exceptions. The dim light in the cramped, cold cell illuminated a basic plastic tray. It held a standard portion of boiled chicken and rice, pure caloric intake. The prisoner consumed the ration slowly. Physiological routine replaced political strategy. The meal ended. The prisoner knelt on the floor. He whispered a low prayer. The cell block went quiet. Before dawn on December 30, 2006, heavy boots struck the concrete floor. The convoy reached the cell exactly as the Islamic world initiated its holiest period. How did an institutional liquidation coincide with a day of mercy? The bureaucratic calendar of the tribunal completely ignored the cultural context of Eid al-Adha. The Feast of Sacrifice traditionally dictates the pardoning of captives. Millions of civilians slaughter livestock to distribute food to the poor. The state apparatus activated a different procedure. This scheduling anomaly triggered immediate structural shock across the Middle East. Execution preparation required pure physics. In an empty, freezing room, fluorescent lights exposed a rough wooden platform. A mechanical trapdoor bisected the floorboards. Above it hung a thick manila rope, strictly calculated by engineers for the exact height and weight of the condemned to cause an instant fracture of the cervical vertebrae. The extraction team breached the holding unit. The target stood ready. He put on a heavy, dark overcoat. He pulled it over a rigid white shirt. Operators secured his wrists behind his back. They marched him down the sterile corridor toward the platform. Beyond the perimeter walls, Baghdad documented another morning of urban combat. Inside the bunker, the environment remained entirely controlled. The drop distance was locked. The physical mechanism lacked any constructive capacity for a misfire or a second chance. How does a dictator's life end technically? The sacred dawn of the Islamic festival of sacrifice provided a stark contrast to a sterile, mechanical execution inside Kadhimiya prison. Biomechanics overruled politics. The scaffold utilized the standard long drop protocol. Engineers calculated the exact rope length for a subject weighing roughly 90 kilograms. The objective was absolute. Fracture the second cervical vertebra. Sever the spinal cord. Avoid decapitation. Saddam stepped onto the platform. His hands remained tightly bound with a thick cord. A guard offered a black hood. He shook his head. He kept his eyes completely uncovered. The rough noose tightened around his bare neck. At 6:05 a.m., the executioner pulled the lever. The wooden trapdoor split open. The body plummeted. A sharp, heavy crunch of the thick rope echoed through the concrete chamber. The torso delivered one violent jolt as the kinetic energy hit absolute zero. The spine separated instantly. The physiological elimination was complete. At 6:14 a.m., the attending physician registered zero heartbeat. The acoustic shock of snapping cervical vertebrae did not stay inside Kadhimiya. Within hours, that audio file hit global servers. The state failed. Officials expected silent, formal government footage for classified archives. Reality delivered a shaky, vertical recording from a cheap mobile phone, overlaid with the screams of a hostile crowd. Discipline inside the execution chamber broke completely. Shouts and insults bounced off the concrete walls. Sectarian slurs interrupted the final seconds. Someone pressed record. In late 2006, mobile sensors captured a maximum of 1.3 to 2 megapixels. It was just visual noise. But this low-resolution pixelated matrix carried enough weight to instantly crash the servers of early video platforms. The government lost control. Unfiltered megabytes bypassed state censors entirely. A massive audience stretching from Baghdad to Washington downloaded the footage. The digital bypass circumvented institutional filters and immediately radicalized the streets. Users copied the raw video file. Anonymous nodes mirrored the exact data across thousands of independent networks. While mirrored data ignited street battles across Baghdad, the biological remains required immediate physical disposal. Guards cut the execution rope. Ground transport posed a critical risk. A surface convoy guaranteed an ambush. Commanders ordered an aerial extraction. Why was the burial conducted before dawn? Security protocols required hiding the grave before the country woke up. Handlers wrapped the corpse in a plain white cotton shroud. The fabric laid flat on the metal floor of the military helicopter. No casket, no ceremony, just dead weight vibrating against aviation aluminum. The rotors engaged. The pilots charted a direct course for Al-Auja, a small tribal village near Tikrit. The aircraft touched down in the dark. Tribal elders took custody of the remains. This was a covert logistics operation disguised as a traditional funeral. Headlights cut through the dust. Dozens of unmarked vehicles circled the perimeter. Men lowered the shroud into the dirt. The excavation site sat within a simple family plot. Workers positioned the grave directly beside his sons, Uday and Kusay, killed by American assault teams in July 2003. The clandestine night burial in Tikrit failed to extinguish the conflict. Instead, the operation triggered the physical dismemberment of the capital. Shiite factions registered the hanging as verified justice. They accepted the execution as a strict correction for previous massacres. Sunni communities processed the event as a calculated erasure of their political power. The ideological fracture immediately mandated territorial segregation. Mixed neighborhoods dissolved. Families abandoned their properties to escape militia sweeps, and armed groups quickly occupied the vacant city sectors. The year 2006 broke all regional mortality projections. Tens of thousands of civilians died in a single year. By 2007, this rapid escalation required a drastic engineering intervention to stabilize the collapsing zones. Baghdad transitioned into a compartmentalized fortress. American military units deployed heavy machinery across the urban grid. Cranes lowered multi-ton concrete blocks straight onto the asphalt. The gray rough barriers permanently sealed off once active transit routes, forcing all remaining civilian traffic through heavily guarded choke points. Military checkpoints bottlenecked every district perimeter. Infantrymen verified identification papers at sector boundaries. Engineers installed over 30 miles of T-walls throughout the city. The concrete installations physically cemented the demographic rupture. The capital became a partitioned grid.